Welcome to Coding After Work stream, and happy Halloween. We are actually dressed to the occasion. Yep. We also have an amazing guest with us today, but first, we have some great news. We have sponsors.
Yes. The first one is Progress Telerik, and we are super excited about their amazing Blazor components. They were the first one on the market with Blazor controls. We are using the controls at work, and it's super easy to get started and be productive, and they can even be customizable. Chances are that they have what you need. Currently, they have more than 50 truly native components.
Okay, I know what native is, but what is truly native?
So what they did is, instead of taking their JavaScript libraries and just porting them with a Blazor container around them, they actually have rewritten everything in C# in, for Blazor.
Awesome. We also have another sponsor, 1337, a knowledge-driven consultancy company that specializes in innovative, custom-built software solutions. And both 1337 and Progress Telerik are very involved in the developer community.
We have been working with both companies for years, and we are very proud to have them as our sponsors.
But now, time to bring in our guest. Chances are, if you are working in Visual Studio, you're already working with his extensions. Welcome, Mads Kristensen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Are you ready for Halloween?
Yes. You know what I did this year? I got some lights out in front of my house. And so I got some light bulbs that look like fire. So they're orange, yellowy, and it looks like it's burning. And you can even put them upside down, and it looks like the fire comes from below. And they're fantastic. So they light up like in a kind of a scary way. It's pretty awesome. And
nice.
That's kind of it. Our neighbors, they're gone all out. You know, they have graveyard in their front yard. Like they have a whole like skeleton graveyard thing going on. We haven't quite gone to that extent
yet.
Cool. And so I noticed right now that you're wearing your raccoon, and you have a thing about raccoons, if I remember right. Is that?
That is right. This is one of my favorite raccoons. Well, everyone is my favorite raccoon.
All raccoons, even the dirty ones.
So for this year, our Halloween decorations is going to be a projector that is going to project spiders, snakes, and rats onto our porch. And we're going to have a scary cat projected on one of the windows.
Nice.
Yeah. It's all fun.
No scary raccoons?
Raccoons are not scary.
For everybody else, they might be. For Jimmy, he wants them as a pet.
I do.
He has tried. He actually asked for permission.
So apparently in Sweden, you are allowed to have predators as pets if they're dogs, cats, ferrets, and badgers.
But no raccoons.
So you can have a badger that's going to bite you in until the bone is crunching. That's okay. But a cute raccoon, no, never.
Not even if it's wearing a tutu?
I even asked. They said no.
That's just wrong.
I know, right?
So we went to Denmark. I'm from Denmark, and I brought my kids and wife some years ago, and we went to a little zoo, and they had a raccoon. It was like they rescued the animals from around Europe, and they have them in this little tiny zoo that's like for kids or whatever. And they had raccoons. And my wife thought it was the funniest thing, because why do you have raccoons in the zoo? They're everywhere. They're in your backyard. But of course, over there, not so much.
No, not so much. I think we had like one raccoon that came over from Denmark, that came over from whatever country. So it just passed through in the south of Sweden, but no.
I looked everywhere.
Yeah. He was one year when we were in Seattle, he actually asked around, okay, so where's the dumpsters so I can keep a lookout? Slight thing for raccoons. But we're not here to talk about raccoons, are we? We're here to talk about extensions.
But we had so much fun.
Maybe we can do a raccoon extension.
We can do that. There's no limits to what extensions can do and cannot do. They can do everything and anything.
So do you want to share your screen?
Sure. Why not?
Awesome. There we go.
But I think...
So what are actually extensions?
Yeah, right. Let's start with like, what is an extension? And can you do the picture-in-picture actually? Are they sort of on the side or whatever?
Absolutely.
There we go.
Because here, before we dive into the code, I think I need to explain a little bit about extensions, what they can do, and what the anatomy of an extension is. And so I want to start just like super high level, okay? And then we're going to dig deeper, and we're actually going to write an extension throughout this show or this episode. And it's an extension that I think you can actually use at your own company, and you want to modify it a little bit, which is the perfect thing. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to get extensions in the hands of you so that you can have your own extension that you can build and deploy and share in your company, and it's going to add value. It's not going to be just like a simple little thing. It's actually going to be a valuable thing. So that's hopefully what we're going to be able to do today. And it's an idea I had like a while ago and just never really did anything with it. So I thought this was the perfect time to do that. So, but let's start at the beginning. I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to search for extension like that. And you get different things. You get something called a VSIX project. So actually, you could just search for VSIX. And VSIX, that is sort of the short name of a Visual Studio extension. So Visual Studio IDE extensibility, okay? VSIX. So let's do that. And let's put that on my GitHub share here, and let's call it, I want to call it my company. My company. Yeah, that's a great name. And then we just create it. And it doesn't really do much. So this is the anatomy of an extension from the project's perspective. Oh, that was a lot of Zoom going on here. So you see here, it doesn't really have a lot, right? It's got a C# file, and it's got a file here called VSIX manifest. Let's open the VSIX manifest. It's got metadata about your extension, like what's the name of it, what's the ID. The ID you just need, it could be anything. It could be a GUID, it could be any string, as long as it's unique. I personally like just to have a GUID. For some reason, I'm not sure why, actually. And then we need to give it a good description. And in this case, the extension that we want to be building today is, and Jimmy and Jessica, you probably remember this. You start a new job at a company, and there's all these links to different places for the internal wiki, for the build server, for all sorts of resources, and you don't remember them. Some of them are in your welcome email. Some of them you have to ask for.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
Yeah, right. It's a very common thing, and some of them are specific to developers, right? So, for instance, the build server, or some wiki about how to set up your environments, or what it might be. So I want to create an extension that kind of takes all those links and makes them available within Visual Studio, so that all you have to do for our new employees to install one extension, and then boom, they have all the resources they need at their fingertips. So we're going to call this the easiest way to share links relevant to all developers in your team, let's say.
That's great.
We're going to come back to this one again, but that's basically the metadata, and stuff like the name and the description is going to show up. If you go to the extensions and manage extension menu item here, you can see that's what's going to show up here. So here's one, code made, right? That's the product name, and then you have the description underneath. Okay, so these are highly important that we get them right, and that we give a good name, good descriptive name, and a good descriptive description. Like, we want to make sure that by reading the name, you probably have an idea of what the extension does, and by reading the description, you understand why a user would want to install it. Like, it's basically your sales pitch. You're saying what problem it is that your extension is going to solve, something to that effect.
One of my favorite plugins that you made, you actually mentioned on the podcast, add new file. That's a very descriptive name, and it's amazing. If you haven't tried it, you should definitely do that.
Add new file, yeah. It's right here. You see, so that's a good example. Add new file. Okay, you know what the extension does just by the name, right? And then the description: the fastest and easiest way to add new files to any project, including files that start with a dot. So there you have your value prop listed immediately, right? So this explains the entire thing in just a name and a very short description. Actually, I think Windows now lets you create files with a dot easily from Windows Explorer. So maybe I should remove that. That's no longer a selling point if you got Windows 10. Okay, so that was file number 1. File number 2, it's a C# file. See, I have an extension here that I'm going to use to hold comment remover, and that allows me to do Control KQ, and that just removes all comments. And you can see here, just like a lot of other things, we need to build our project for Visual Studio to be able to resolve these resources. So let's build. Let's see here. We should get some. We should have these squiggles removed here. No. Well, that's weird. Build succeeded. Okay, so maybe it just needs to wake up. There we go. Not quite.
Don't we all sometimes?
Don't we all sometimes? Okay. So, and we do have a. Oh, I don't have. It's because I need to restore NuGet packages. So something is up with NuGet packages here. Okay. So let's just take a look at what happened when I built. So I'm going to open the bin folder, go to debug. And you can see here, this is what's in my bin folder. So let's just take them one by one. So the VSIX manifest, that's the exact same metadata file that we just had opened in Visual Studio. Then it puts in the DLL and the symbols, the PDB file, and then it has generated what's called a package dev folder. And finally, a .v6 file. And this is my extension. So this is the one I can take and copy and send to someone or upload to the Visual Studio Marketplace for everyone to see. And it's actually just a zip file. So if you got 7-zip installed or something equivalent, you can just open it by doing this. And you can see we have sort of the same things inside. Got my DLL, got my package dev. We may look at that, but that's just kind of instructions found in my DLL that is being extracted into a sort of an ini file format that Visual Studio knows what to do with when it runs your extension. And then it has the VSIX manifest, and it's got a couple of JSON files that are auto-generated as well, that are used by the Visual Studio Marketplace and the Visual Studio installer. We don't even need to know anything about them. I don't, and and so you don't either, I think. So that's basically what an extension is, right? It's just a zip file of some things that are compiled. Okay, so let me do I think it's kind of weird that, it doesn't show. Here, my company. Okay. So now we're going to do something interesting, because what I want is that I want my extension to put a menu button up on my toolbar here that has my company logo on it.
Well, that's nice.
You can expand it and it will show you sort of sub things that you can click. Okay? Like wiki and dev server and whatnot. So the first thing I need to do is to add a command. They're called commands. So here's a benefit of writing Visual Studio, is that you actually get to learn a lot about Visual Studio a lot faster and more in depth than you probably else, you would be able to by reading or, any other activity. Visual Studio extensibility really lets you understand how Visual Studio works. And also the names. So a command, so any button that's up here, any item in here, they're all commands. So if I click, any menu item that I click is a command that I execute. So I'm going to have to add a command. So I'm going to right-click my project, and I'm going to say add new item. And I'm going to say, look at this, under extensibility, there's something called command right there. So let's call this command, let's call this main command. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it whatever. And it's going to do a bunch of things here. So you have to excuse my version of Visual Studio. It's nightly built to Visual Studio, okay? So it might be wonky, but that's just, I'm used to it by now. I'm used to it. I install a new nightly build probably like every second day or every third day, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna wait a couple of days and then try again, and that's just how it goes. Like when we do dog fooding internally, it's a great way to find issues and stabilize the product. So we got a few things here. Let's start with my command or main command.cs. That's the one that's open here. Again, I'm going to Control KQ to remove my comments here. And so again, that's a comment remover. It's the name of that extension. And unfortunately, this is unhelpfully complex, and we're going to simplify this, which is going to help a lot. But let's just look at what we're doing here. We have a command, and I'm going to skip to the important parts. It registers the command that I just added with Visual Studio with the command service. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Visual Studio is made up of a bunch of services that we can use. We can just kind of import the service and then talk directly to it. And that's exactly what we're doing here with the command service. And the way we got command service is from this initialize async method, where it says get service async. Basically this big line of code right here. So that's how we can retrieve existing functionality within VS and code against it and extend it. And so when our command is being executed, it's being clicked on, we point to this delegate called execute, and that is down here. And all it does is that it shows a message box. Okay, so it does like an alert box. So that was that, and then it gives us another file. It's a VSCT file, Visual Studio Command Table. It's an XML file, and that describes my command that I just added. It's a button. All commands are buttons, described as buttons here in this XML file. You see it's under the commands here. So buttons. Okay, so here's the text for it. Invoke main command. All right. It's got like an icon that is used from main command PNG that got added here. And let me just zoom in on this, and maybe we can see what it looks like if I hover. You see it has like, it's basically an image list. It has 6 images in it, and they're all registered right here. So everything in Visual Studio is basically a GUID and an ID, a GUID and an integer pair. And so we're kind of registering that right here so that we can use it on our button. And our button we put as the parent of the button is this group that we create here. And the parent of that group is our menu tools. So that's this menu tools here. So this is very confusing. I know that, but it's going to all make sense, I promise. So let's just try to see what happens. I'm going to just run this extension, Control F5. I'm not going to attach a debugger. I'm just going to compile it. So that will compile into my VSIX file that we just looked at in the bin folder, right? And then deploy it to what's called the experimental instance of Visual Studio. So, and you can see here, it's now loading user settings. This is the experimental instance. It's not the same thing as my regular Visual Studio. It kind of is, but the difference is it doesn't use the same settings. It doesn't use the same registry to store things in. And so everything is kind of a clean slate. Okay. So if I had a different theme, so here I have the dark theme here in the experimental instance. I don't have that in my regular Visual Studio here. If I go to tools, we can see here I have invoke main command. It's right here. If I can find it, there we go. And you see it got that image from that image list, that PNG with all those 6 images in it shows up here. And if I click it, it gives me that message box, right? So now we've actually written an extension. This is now a fully functional, fantastic extension. It doesn't do much, and we're going to fix that, right?
But it's an extension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
you can kind of see how the Visual Studio like templates actually get you going really, really quickly, right?
So if I would do this, is it okay to put in Visual Studio extension on my LinkedIn page?
Yeah, what do you mean? Like have it for download there?
No, I mean, if I've compiled that and it's working, it's showing me the message box, do I know how to write an extension now?
Can you add it as a skill, you mean?
Yeah.
Well,
Put it on your CV.
yeah, I guess technically you know how to write that extension. So that's true.
See? And then you can do an exact copy of that, and then you have made two.
Yeah.
That's true.
I see a career here.
So let's do a little bit of cleanup. That's going to help us out. So I'm going to use this add new file here. I'm going to add a folder called commands, like that. And I'm just going to put that command class in there. Okay, yes, please move it. Right, so that now I now have this. This is the one we just looked at. It's now in here. I'm just kind of cleaning up. I like that. Also, this VSCT file, I personally like to call it VS command table.vsct. And of course, that's kind of silly because that's basically the file extension VSCT stands for Visual Studio Command Table. And that's the name I gave the file to. So it's kind of weird, but I like it to be sort of last in my, V is like late in the alphabet. So it's always at the end. And it has a code behind. And it has a code behind because I have an extension. So if you can share that link, I got the aka.ms link that points to Visual Studio, that point to an extension called Extensibility Essentials 2019. Let me show it to you right here. Oh, I can't actually do that. Anyway, that is an extension pack, which is another type of extension we can do. An extension pack is basically just a very, very simple, no code needed extension that points to other extensions that will be downloaded and bundled automatically by the Visual Studio installer. And so it installs a bunch of extensions that are relevant to extension authors, like all of us, right? And I know it's very meta that you to write an extension, you need extensions. And you technically don't, but your life is going to be a lot easier if you install this thing. So I highly recommend you do. And that will give you a code behind to our VSCT file. So our VSCT file we already saw here, right? And that's where I have my button and my group, bitmaps. I have my symbols, my GUIDs, and my ID pairs. And in its code behind, those GUIDs and IDs are automatically generated and added here to this class. So now I have what's called a single source of truth, which is super important. So I can do the same with my VSIX manifest file, this file, because I might need the name my company to show up somewhere else, right? And I don't want to have that string defined multiple places. So I can just right click and say synchronize to code file. And that creates this file. So here we go. It takes all that metadata and makes available. So now we can start kind of making our code here a little bit nicer. So for instance, in my package class, which is where this is my entry point. This is the one we didn't talk about yet. This is my entry point for my extension. Like this is the thing that gets loaded. This is where I register all my different commands. And I do that in this method here called initialize async. When I added the main command, it automatically added this line into this template or into this file. So that's kind of cool, right? But I'm using this right up here. The GUID of this class, and it needs a GUID, is defined right here. D601 and so forth. But it's also defined right here. My company package, D0 whatever, right? So now I have two sources of truth, and that's kind of annoying. So what I want to do is that I want to get rid of this one. Let's get rid of that region too. And use what's in that code behind right here. So that's right here. See D601. So I can just come in and do that by saying package, GUIDs, and then it was this one, I think, right? D6. Yep. Here we go. So I can start cleaning up like this. That's kind of nice. I like that. So we need a few other things here. We need a logo for my extension. Check out this. All extensions need a good logo, a good icon. It's super important. If your extension does not have a good icon, who's going to download it? The problem when your extension doesn't look good, like good title, good description, great logo, people are going to think, oh, if they couldn't spend time doing something like getting a good logo or whatever, the extension is probably not that good. Right? You know that from everywhere else in life. Like products that don't present well, people might not think that they're any good. And this is the exact same here. You want to make sure that you have as many downloads as possible. So we need to have a good icon. And by good icon, I just mean good quality icon, not a blurry image. So I found a logo here, icon. Just going to copy that into my resource folder right here. I just chose something, okay? I searched for the word logo and I got like a zodiac sign for Libra, which happened to be mine. So it's like, yeah, that's a good one. So we're just going to pretend that this is my company logo. And so I can now come in here and use this drop down and say, okay, logo. And I can do preview as image here as well, even though that's not really used anymore. I kind of just do it anyway. And then I'm going to look at properties for this icon. And check this out. The build action for the PNG file is that this is content. Okay. So content means that it's going to build it into my bin directory and it's going to be bundled into my extension itself. And well, that's what this means. Include this in the VSIX file, the .v6 file extension. Yes, true. So that's important. We need to ship it with it. So that's good to know. And when it comes to this other PNG file here with all the logos, we want to use a different logo for that as well. So I'm going to just grab 16 by 16 logo, put that right here. And then we can register that. So now I can say logo 16 by 16. And now there's only one logo in here, one image, right? There's not a list of images. So I just have one. So I can just say this one should just be, I'll just delete the other ones here. Like right there. And I might as well want to clean them up here. I don't need to register things that no longer exist. So now the name here is BMP Pig 1, and that corresponds with that up here, which is the one we used up here. Okay. And then the name of this button is My Company. Make sense so far?
Absolutely. I love how you clean up. I mean, the template is a little bit messy to start with.
Yeah.
So this is really good stuff.
Well, I'm glad. Okay, so now we have the experimental instance, tools, and see, look at this.
Yay.
Yay. Amazing, right?
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So, and that was kind of easy. Just replacing images is kind of an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But what we want to do, let me explain the next thing here. Because we were talking about having a button and we were talking about having a group. And they are concept of that VSCT XML file. And here we can actually see them. So all of these things that you click are commands, like all the things that does something when you click them, right? And a command or a button is always inside a group, okay? And you can actually see if you have more than one command, more than one button in the same group, because the boundaries of the group in the menus have like these horizontal lines. So this one here, connect to database and connect to server, they don't have a line between them. That means that they are in the same group. They have the same parent. Whereas My Company is the only button in the group that it's in. Okay. So then we have something like this. SQL Server, that's a button that's inside a group. And no other button is in this group. Okay, so the group then has a menu. So that's a third concept that we're going to look at as well. it has a menu, and those create these flyouts. And that menu has a group. And in that group, we got 3 buttons. Remember, button has to be in a group. A button cannot be hosted inside another button, and it cannot be hosted inside a menu. It can only be in a group. And the same goes for a menu. A menu can only be inside a group. So that creates that sort of hierarchy. So let's see if we can take our command, my company, and put it inside this toolbar. So I'm just going to close this. So, okay, so to do that, we need to change our group from being hosted here, from being in the menu, the tools menu up here, to being on the standard toolbar. And because I have that extension I was telling you about before, I get IntelliSense in here. So I can, this is actually the tool standard, that's the standard toolbar. So you have to try this. It's a little bit trial and error sometimes, because there's a lot of places you could put things, and so the names are not always obvious. But you know, I'm sure it's. But you can figure it out, and you can also look on. You can also Google these things. Okay, so now I put this group on the toolbar, and then I want to instruct my button here that how it should look like. Okay, so how do we make that? Let's see here. What we want to do is let's see here. I'm looking it up at the same time. I have this in another extension. Let's just see what happens. Let's just run this. I think by default it will show the menu. There it is. See that?
Cool.
And so when you click it, it does its thing. So we just reparented the same command, but from a menu to a toolbar. That's kind of neat. But let's say we don't want it here. We want it in a different location. We want all the way over here to the right-hand side. How do we do that? So the group here has a priority of, hex 600. And the higher the number, the lower it will go in a menu, or the more to the right it will go in a toolbar. So let's just do something like this. This is pretty up there, and let's see where that lands us. Oh, and by the way, for the online viewers, if you got any questions, please just ask them in the comment section. See, now we have our button right here. It even says my company when you hover over it. So that's kind of nice, right? We can maybe we can control that. So that's kind of cool. But we don't want a button. We want a menu. So let's see how we're going to do that. Actually, first, before we do that, let's just clean up here. Let's remove the old PNG, the image list. We no longer need that. And then let's clean up our command, because that's going to help us understand better what's going on. So initialize async. The first thing we're going to do is that we're going to switch to the main thread. This is important why we want to do this, because when we get services like this, most services, they live on the UI thread, and so we don't want to marshal from a background thread, because that can result in deadlocks and other things. So we want to kind of just asynchronously wait till we can move our execution to the UI thread before we do that, and that's what this line here does. So now we can ask for our, let's see here, we can ask for our service. And so there's a nicer way to do this, I think. So I'm gonna do this. This is a service that, you can see here, like this. Now we're because when this template was written, you had to do it that other way, but now we can actually do it using this new syntax using generics, which is a lot nicer.
That looks way nicer.
Yeah, doesn't it? And so here's what it does. Then it creates like an instance. So where is the instance? So it basically, because this is static. So now it news up an instance of itself, okay? And passes in the package class. So the package was our here, right? It passes itself into our initialize async method. And there's no reason for this. There's really no reason for this. I'm just going to nuke that. And I'm going to nuke all this stuff here. And this stuff here. I'm going to just continue nuking stuff. Then I'm going to grab this. So I got my command service. Now I'm going to register the command. So I can nuke this up here. And so it calls execute, but that's not static. So let's just make it static. You're probably not going to unit test your command class. You might want to unit test the logic that it calls into if it's a more complex nature. So just static. And of course, static makes it harder to mock and all those things. That's why I mentioned unit test. But anyway, so we need, see here, the command ID needs a GUID and an ID. Sorry, GUID and an integer. And that's exactly what we were dealing with before. So package GUIDs dot GUID my company package command set. Okay, well, what does that map to? Here. See here, I have my GUID my company package command set and my main command ID. And if we look at our button, that's exactly the GUID that it's got and the ID that it's got. So that's how we register for that specific ID or button. And this one is called package IDs, and we had one called main command ID right there. So let's take a look at if we simplified this. So now I just have my initialize async, where I register my command and run the execution right here if I need to. And see, this one needs a package. Well, I don't have that package, so I have to pass it into this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to change this just a little bit so that we can do execute, and we can pass it the package. Okay? Because the package, we got that right here. So I can just do this. Here we go. So now I just pass that into it. Easy peasy, right? So a great simplification, 40 lines of code, and nothing is changed, right? It does the same thing as before. Pretty basic. So let's just make sure that it actually still works. Still there.
Oh no.
Oh, keyword
So
this.
close.
I'm using the word this somewhere. Oh, right here. So, okay, it needs something. So main command. There we go. There we go. So now I click the button. So let's talk about what actually happens when I click the button. So right now, Visual Studio has not loaded my extension yet. There is nowhere in my extension that I have told Visual Studio to load my extension. There is a way that I can tell Visual Studio to load my extension, but if I don't do that, then it's not going to load it until some of the resources that is registered with my extension is being used, such as executing a command. So when I click this button right here, let's just do it. See, it still works. When I click the button for the very first time, what happens is that my package class gets run. It's the initialize async method is being run. That means that it's going to call my main command and initialize my main command. All right, so it's going to now run this method here. And then when it's done with that, it's going to call the execution of my command itself. And we set up our command handler for that to be the execute method right here. So first the package loads, and then the command is being executed. And we don't have to worry about that as extenders. So that's kind of nice. But it's also really good because that means that we're not taking up any resources for our users until we're used. And that's a key thing to remember, because the last thing we want to do is that we want to slow down our users' machines, or we want to do work when we don't have to do work, right? We don't want that. So we want to load as late as possible, always. And that's, so far, that's exactly what we're doing here. This is the simplest example of doing exactly that. Okay. But we need to do a little bit more, because we need to do a menu, right? Because what I want is something that can fold out. Do we have an example of that? Here. I want a menu so that my button has a drop down with my resources in it. So I'm just going to create a new simple Control D, duplicate the line. And I'm going to call this, let's just call it main menu. And I'm going to give this a unique ID. They have to be unique within the same GUID. Okay. So it's kind of easy to do. And I want another group as well, because remember, right now we got the, we need the group to host our commands in. And I'm going to call this main group. Oh, so, no, not main group. So subgroup. Our main group, my main menu group, is, I'm going to move that up here. Let's call that 1030. So my main menu group is where I want my menu to live in. Well, let's just do it, and then it all makes sense. Okay, so I got a group here. I want a menu on this group. So I'm going to go in here and do menus. And there's a snippet for that if you have that extension that we talked about before. That's going to make that easier. And the GUID for that is command set like this. And the ID was something about menu, right? Main menu. And this is going to be a menu controller. And the button text here is my company. Okay. So what else are we going to do to our menu? We're actually going to make it such that that this is not, we're going to add what's called a command flag. We're going to say this is not in, oh, not command name. Here, command flag, not in here, toolbar list, not in toolbar list is what we're going to call this. We're going to see why that is, that matters in a moment. Okay, so now I got that. So now I want to make sure that I have a menu that I can put inside my, a group that I can put inside my menu. And that was my submenu group. And we're going to parent this one to the menu we just created. So this one, I'm going to point to the main menu like that. You see that? So I got a parent group here that's on the standard toolbar. And I forgot to add, there's no parent here. We need to have a parent. Parent, command set, ID, and my menu group. Okay. And we need to give this a priority. No, not for this, not up here. That was wrong. Okay. So you can see how this parenting stuff works. So my menu is now in my group up here on the toolbar. And I'm now injecting another menu, submenu, into the menu here. And so my button is what I want in my new submenu group. So I'm going to put this in the submenu group. Okay. So I still have the one command. Oh, so here's a fun, oh, I accidentally turned on something here. So here's something that's interesting. When you have the experimental instance running like this, you cannot compile your project. And I forgot to close it down when I was done with it. So let's just do that again.
That's a good tip.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know.
Mhm. Well, it's one of those things you learn pretty early on, right?
Yeah.
Just because, like, why does it not build? It just says it can't deploy. Check this out. Ooh.
Look at that.
And I click it, and boom.
Still works.
Yay! So that's kind of amazing. So, hey, have you guys noticed this? Do you ever see this one, or is it an internal thing for Visual Studio users? I've never figured out if anyone else sees this, or it's something the team does with internal builds only, so that they can figure out what's going on.
I don't think I've seen that particular one.
Okay, so that might just be an internal one.
But then again, do you actually read them?
I don't. I usually just leave them.
Oh, that's irritating.
Well, yellow is giving you energy.
No, cortisol. You're thinking about cortisol.
Okay, so we're gonna have this one called Developer Wiki. Okay, this is actually gonna go to my wiki page. So how do I open the wiki page? Well, let's change our command. So I think we should rename this to wiki command.
Sounds reasonable.
Doesn't it? Okay, so let's rename that.
I kind of feel I get it. I'm getting a little bit of a bad conscience because I know how my extensions look and they look nothing like this.
You don't clean yours, do you?
No, I do not. And my command probably is named main command.
Oh yeah, main command 1.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I
that's
totally
very
need
common.
to clean that up.
That's what I see everywhere. But but I was the program manager for the Visual Studio extensibility team for a few years, and so all the extensions that I do and that I put out there are all sort of educational. I want them to be something that other people can like be inspired or looking at or learn from or whatever. So there's a little bit of I have to make them very simple, and as clean as possible. I don't think that's not that important for you guys, but
It's a good incentive.
Yeah, I think so.
But then again, it is Halloween. We should really have shown Jimmy's extension if they're that bad. Scary things.
So how do you
Let's
open a URL? You do it like this, right? So let's say we have an internal wiki. So example.com, right? That's always a good one. Actually, let's move this out. Let's call this URL, because why not? So I'm going to start this URL, and that's going to work, right? That's just going to open my default browser to this URL. But let's go VS Utilities, VS Shell Utilities. That's a type that I get. And in here, if I search for browser, I can say open browser or open system browser. Okay. So open system browser, I believe, is probably the exact same thing that's going to happen under the hood. I don't actually know. Can I disassemble this? Is that a thing? I'm just hitting F12 on this particular. Why do we need a shell utility method for this? Okay. So it calls the open browser method right here. And so this one does a few things, right? So this one, it receives a service, and then it says service.openstandardpreviewer, and it gives it some things. So that's a thing we could do. So because in Visual Studio, we actually have a browser built in. So we can say, if we say open browser, does this need anything? It just flags. Oh, I don't know. What are the browser flags that I got available? Great web browser. Is this it? No history this page. Yeah, probably something like this. See, so now we get into like some weirdness about Visual Studio where it's not like super obvious. This is because Visual Studio is COM based, But you see here, it says it takes a uint flags instead of taking an enum, right? So because that's just how it works. And for some of these older things, so I can do it this way. I can do this way, or I can do sort of the .NET way, just process.start. So it kind of depends. I think this is super clean. Process.start. Open browser does it. Let's just see what happens. Now it's going to do both. So that's going to be super annoying. So that's not how we're going to end up having it. But so you see the difference.
Let's open all the browsers.
Really Alta Vista or something along those eras, time eras.
So I got example.com opening up here.
They should get a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
So that opened up twice, right? So because I did it wrong, open browser. Yeah, I should probably have given it some flag that I wanted in. Okay, anyway, let's just keep to this one. So this doesn't even need any of this. Boom. Super clean. 30 lines of code. Last when I do this.
You see that, Jimmy? 30 lines of code.
Yeah, that's how you do it. So now we can add more stuff, right? And so let me show you an easy way to do that. Because I could go in here and say, okay, command, let's add another command. So let's just right click and say add new item. And we did this before, right? And I select command again. Don't do this. Don't ever do this. Only do that the first time when you don't have a command already. Now we do have a command. So what I'm going to do.
Why shouldn't you do that?
Just because it adds some different things that are unnecessary. It starts writing. I like to be in control. So you saw the complexity of the command class, right?
Yeah.
And I had to clean it up, and I don't want to do that every time. So I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to say I'm going to create another command. So this was the wiki command. So I'm just going to call wiki. This one I'm going to call build server. So I just renamed this to wiki. That means I have to rename it up here
Fix
too.
things.
Yeah, I have to rename it everywhere. Right now it won't compile. Oh, wiki. So
the reason for this over complex XML is really because Visual Studio should know about the buttons and the menus without actually loading any and running any code, right?
That's exactly right. So this XML is going to be compiled into our assembly, and Visual Studio, when you install an extension, it will look for what's called a command table, which basically is this XML compiled into a DLL file, and it registers that. So very specifically, so here's what happens. The last thing that happens after you install an extension is that the Visual Studio installer runs a command on the command line called dev-env exec. That's Visual Studio's executable. /update configuration. That doesn't actually run Visual Studio. That just calls it to update its configuration. That means go and find all the menu items and buttons in these DLL files and create that structure that can instantly be loaded in when Visual Studio starts up, right? It's creating this kind of cache. And so it doesn't have to load your extension, doesn't have to do anything to show those menu items that we're creating here because it did that update configuration.
Right.
So we got wiki, we got, what was it? Build server. Build server. And let's give this an icon. Okay. So right now it's just using the same icon, and let's do something else. I want to give this sort of a build server icon. So how do I do that? Well, I could just create another 16 by 16 icon, or I could add a 16 by 16 icon to the existing one so it gets longer, it becomes a list, right? And I can just do sort of what we had in the beginning. But Visual Studio ships with icons that we can freely use. So again, if you have that extension I told you about, you're going to have a window called the Known Monikers Explorer. And it has the almost 4,000 extensions that Visual Studio ships with that you are free to use. And they are high DPI, vector graphics, all this sort of stuff. These are the ones you want to use when you can, because then you don't have to deal with the complexity and the quality of maintaining your own images. So in order to do that, we're going to include it. If I can spell it, include known monikers VSIX file. Okay. So now I can go down to my button here. I have to do a command flag. Now let's just do this. So I want image catalog GUID. Now check this out. I now have IntelliSense for every single image in Visual Studio. And let's just take the first one, just so you can see how it works.
That's super convenient.
Yeah. I'm then going to say that this icon is a moniker. Icon is moniker command flag. So now I'm instructing Visual Studio's menu system to say, this is not a PNG that I ship here. Use the built-in monikers. Or you can actually create your own monikers, but we don't do that in this case. So now it's just a matter of coming here. It's okay, which icon should we use? So something about a build server. So what if I search for build? I get a bunch of stuff here. Build. Is there even user build? Build machine. What if I search for server? It's kind of nice, right? I can just search. So remote server. Yeah, maybe local server. Yeah, why not? Let's take this one. Or should we do one with color? Let's do one with color on it, just because there's not that many. No, let's do the local server. Oh, I can export this actually. So I want 90 by 90 pixels. Then I can just export that. If I wanted to select the JPEG, PNG, or GIF. But in this case, I don't need that. I just want to right click and say copy name to clipboard. And then come in here and paste it. Boom, local server. All right. Or I could just have written it like that. So I cannot compile yet because I renamed this thing to wiki. Like that. So that's the wiki command. Let's just copy this whole thing and call this build.
And now we have wiki command 1. No.
No. So this is now build server command. And so let's just change that. We're going to keep the URL here. And we're going to say that the command is no longer the wiki. It is the build server, like that. The URL is the same. That's fine for now. And let's run this. And we should see something weird, but let's take it one step at a time here. Okay. Ooh, see that? Ooh. I'm going to click build server. So it's going to open the browser. Oh, it's going to crash. Oh, it's this. No, nothing is going to crash. Nothing is going to happen at all because we forgot a very important thing. We forgot to register this. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. This happens sometimes. This line right here, right? Build server command. There we go. I just need to register. So one thing you could do here is that you could actually pass it the URL right here. So you have like just one place where you can have all the easily see the URLs, for instance, if you wanted to. But really, probably what you want is you want to at some point have a base class here, so you can do this more easily. Okay, so now if I click build server, it opened up here. You don't see it. I have it on a different screen, but it opened this page. But check this out. It now changed the default logo here to be the build server, to be the last one that you clicked. Okay.
That is a bit weird.
Well, It depends on the use case. In this case, I think it's weird. I always want my company logo there, right?
Yeah.
So there is a trick, I believe. And let's see here. Yes. Let's see if I can do it. I'm not sure I can. So we need to add a command flag. Fix menu controller. Okay. So to my wiki page, the one with the right logo, the company logo, I'm going to have a command flag here saying fix menu controller. Okay. What does that even mean? Like it's broken and it fixes it? Right? It's bizarre. Let's try it. Build server, click. And it opened my example.com. But notice the logo didn't change.
Yeah, look at that.
So now we get the behavior we want, right? So you can just copy paste. You can just make this as long as you want. Right? You can easily add more to this one. What would be like some good ideas for people to put in here? What are like some common places?
Oh, what could that be? Well, there's usually some kind of intranet with pictures of people. Probably other employees, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Random people.
I'm just thinking for if people want to fork this on GitHub once I put it out there and deploy this in their own at their own team or their own company or whatever, then that might be a fun idea to have. Like, what are some ideas they can have? But I mean, what ifs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll figure it out. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Let's see what else we can do. Because if I hover over some of these, well, okay, not these, but they had keyboard shortcuts. So let's say I want to add a keyboard shortcut.
Ooh, you can add those?
Yeah. And I want to do it to my build server. Right? I use that a lot. So let's take a look at what's happening. I'm going to run this just so that we can kind of understand a little bit about commands and then how to find an available keyboard shortcut, because that's important. We can't just take over a shortcut. That's not how Visual Studio works. We have to find an available one. So here's what I mean, right? See this one? When I hover over this one, it says what the keyboard shortcut is. And it would be kind of nice if this one did that same thing, right? If there was a keyboard shortcut that we could see it. So I'm going to go to Tools Options. And I want to show you something first. We're going to find our developer wiki is what we call it. I'm going to go to Keyboard here. I'm going to search for developer wiki. I'm going to search for wiki. Not seeing anything. Why am I not seeing anything? Oh, because I said not in TB list. Is that right? What about the other one was called the build server? That's not in there either. Okay, that's bizarre. But either way, I can start finding some things like control KI. Okay, that's taken, that's used by edit quick info. So we have to find something that's available. So that could be Control Shift 8. No, that's taken too. Control Alt 8 or Shift Alt 8. Okay, maybe that's what I'm going to use, right? So that's how you find an available one. So, okay, I could find, I'm not sure what this does, to be honest. Does this prohibit my buttons from being there? Let's just run this. I'm curious now. I got this from an extension I already had, so I'm like, yeah, there's probably a reason for this. And now I'm like not sure what that reason is. So let's take a look. It looks fine. And it works fine. Okay. So let's take a look here again. So keyboard. No.
Hmm.
No command. Okay. So we're going to give our command some names here. Oh, hang on. My company. Oh, that's the menu. So developer wiki. I'm going to give it a loc canonical name. So loc means localization. I'm going to start it with a dot, sorry. And I'm going to call it my company dot developer wiki. Okay. And I'm going to put that down here as well. And this one is called build server. Okay. So that should hopefully register the command correctly, so that other people can find it. When you can find a command, that means you can manually yourself change or remove or add keyboard shortcuts to it if you wanted to.
And the reason for the dot is just so that we don't have to look for it, right?
No. I'll show you. So some of these, so this is just a list of them all. And there are some here on the list that are really, really long. See here, project and solution context menu dot item dot set it, but they get longer. They get much longer than that. But this is not a nice kind of way of doing it. All we kind of need is like file nesting. It should be called file nesting dot add solution settings, potentially, right? There's no reason to have all these long ones here. And so the dot makes sure that nothing gets inserted before them.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. My company dot build server. If I did not have the dot in front, notice how the dot doesn't show up here. It gets stripped away. If I wouldn't have it on here, it would say something like standard toolbar, other context menus, dot, and so on. So the dot makes it sort of clean. Okay. So anyway, so now that I'm here, I could then go in and say, okay, my wiki. That's fine. What is it? Shift Alt 8. Control Shift. Okay, so Shift Alt. Is that even like? Can I even do that? I don't know if that actually will trigger Shift Alt. Is that like? Okay, let's just try it. Okay, so now let's so the user can come in here and assign those things themselves, right? But we want to do that by default. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to do key bindings. That's how they're called internally. Keyboard shortcut is called a key binding. And this is for GUID command set like this. And the ID was, let's do the wiki. And the editor is, I think we always just use this one. I'm actually not sure why that is. And so here, so key 1 is 8. And the modifier is Shift and Alt. I do believe this is the case, and then we can just finish it like that. Okay, does that make sense? So for the command that has this GUID and this ID, we're going to say means globally. I don't know if you noticed, but hey, here's a pro tip. I always keep like my tools options right here. For some reason, this just takes forever, and I just have them right there. It's kind of nice. So keyboard. What was I going to do? Oh, yeah, global. So see here how it says global? That's global scope. That means no matter what you're doing, the keyboard shortcut here should work. So I can just do this one, and then I can do one for the other one, build server. And let's just say that 9 is available. We haven't tested it, but let's just go for it. And it might not be that Shift and Alt is actually a thing that's allowed. We'll see. Oh, it is. If it wasn't allowed, it wouldn't show it. So Shift Alt 8, Shift Alt. I'm just gonna try that. Yep, and it opened up the browser right there.
Nice.
You have to believe me, I guess, because you can't actually tell. Isn't that cool?
It is.
So I want to do one more thing, and that is I want to create a new group. So we have a submenu group. I want to create a group here for like other. So these are submenu. Let's do one here that's about HR. Oh, HR. Human resources at your company.
Yep.
So I'm going to create another group. And this is HR. And I guess we don't need this one. And then I'm going to create another button. Oh, so that means I need to create another button here. This is HR portal. And we're just going to give it a unique ID, 300, like that. And so now I can come in here and create my HR. Oh. So my button is now HR portal, and I'm going to put it in HR group. Okay. So HR portal. And we're going to do another icon here. We're going to do something about human or user. Right here, see all these people here. So maybe just user error.
Well, it depends on why you need HR, right? Could be user error.
Yeah, right. So let's just do that one, user. Okay. So now we have that in the HR group. Where's the HR group? It's in here. It's in the main menu. Okay. So let's give this a different priority, just because I want to explain priority. What? Oh, what did I do? HR portal. There we go. And what did it say? It said, oh yeah. Here we go. Yeah, so IDs cannot have spaces in them. That makes sense, right? Just like in C#.
Yeah.
So I want to show you the priority thing, because now it kind of, for some reason, I think that it looks more professional when you split things up with that that horizontal line. Right? It's I don't know. To me, it just looks better, and it creates some structure. But notice here how my portal is before my HR group is before my submenu group right here. Okay. Why is that? Well, that is, again, because we have the groups up here. Even though my HR menu group is defined later, it has a lower priority. So in order to ensure that it's after, I can actually do this because it's all relative. So I have to add a huge number for the toolbar to make it sure that on the toolbar, the menu was located at the end. But inside the menu, there's only these two groups, so they only have to be relative to each other. So the lower comes first and the higher comes later, right? And the same thing's true with the buttons. So they have the same priority here. And then I don't know who then wins, but if you want to be very explicit, then you can do that 100 and 200 as priority. Down here, it doesn't matter yet because for the portal, we don't have anything else in that group, so there's nothing to compete with. That's basically it. So now, I think we have a pretty compelling extension, don't you think?
Definitely.
I would say so.
And so we can then always talk about how do you distribute it to your team members and so on. And you can just send them a link. You can put this on a share somewhere. You can even upload it if you want to. You can upload it to the Visual Studio Marketplace. I don't know why you wanted that if it's specific to your company, but you could. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. And they might all be internal URLs, right? And so no one else can actually use it.
Yeah.
So that is one thing you could do. Okay, so I think this is looking good, right? We have the right order. We don't have keyboard shortcuts for everything, and that's fine too. And maybe we don't want keyboard shortcuts, and that we don't need.
Of
keyboard
course we
shortcuts.
do.
Of course. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, maybe not for HR. Hopefully not for HR.
Yes. So I think this is kind of cool. It used to be that you could have a menu item up here, so you could inject your own main menu item. So this could be my company, could be between, let's say, extensions and window up top here. But that's not allowed in Visual Studio 2019. And so,
Well, it makes sense.
yeah, I mean, the list could get long, right?
Yeah.
So here, like this little icon, like fits everywhere. And you could do it on the standard toolbar, any other toolbar. You can create your own toolbar. And but anyway, this is like a very good way. Your logo is always visible. I should probably have done one with more color just to make it pop a little bit. But so I don't know if you noticed this, but the image is here. The logo is actually white, but the image, look at the image, is black.
Huh.
So
Nice.
Visual Studio automatically figures out to invert the colors when you're in dark mode versus or dark theme versus blue theme or light theme.
Huh. That's nice.
Yes. And so how long do we have left? We got a little bit of time. So let's see if we can, let's say that you don't want that to happen. Like because you have some beautiful colors, right? And you don't want those to be inverted in dark theme. How do you do it? We're gonna end with that. I'm gonna create a folder called icons.
And with the awesome extension, add new file.
Right. So here are my icons. I'm going to right click this and say generate image manifest. So hang on. These are the same icon, but in 3 different
Yep.
sizes. Okay. I'm going to right click the folder and say generate image manifest. That gives me this file right here. I think this technically has to be a 1. But that's it. So I have one GUID and one ID. All right. And so that's what I'm registered. The image here I register, and there's 3 different sources under it. Because some people have large screens, some people have small screens. So some people have high DPI, like 200% DPI. So that means that 16 by 16 would be very blurry because it would basically be 8 by 8 scaled up. So in that case, you want 32 by 32, right? So I can now take these and use that instead. So if I come in here, my menu, I'm going to go down and register. Instead of registering my images here, I'm going to call this my, like icons. And I'm going to give it this ID, this GUID. That in there. And my picture is called logo, and it says 1. So logo 1. Then I can go up to my developer wiki, where I said the icon is whatever it is right there. And instead, I'm going to do icons. And the ID is logo. Then I have to say that, hey, this is actually icon is moniker, like that. And then I no longer need my bitmaps. So we can delete those. And yeah, I repurpose this one, so no longer it's the bitmap. And I should now be able to build this. Let's just test it out. It compiles. So now we should see an image that is of a higher quality. So I'm running my DPI resolution right now, or DPI setting or whatever, is 135%. Okay, 135%. So the logo I get here is probably 24 by 24. It is not 16 by 16 or 32 by 32, because the one that is the closest is the 24 by 24. So that's cool. So now it kind of works with like the larger sets, the larger monitors and so on. But I can go into this image and say allow color inversion. Okay. So I've looking back, I chose the very, very wrong logo for this because it's not going to be a dark theme with a dark logo, but you can see how that works right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of see it.
You can kind of see it, right?
Yeah, so that's a pro tip. Make sure your icons actually work on all the different colors.
So depending on what your company logo is or whatever, you can play around with like doing that. Okay, so that was it. That was my company. And we can delete this. So now I just need to throw this onto the GitHubs, and to do that, I'm gonna go in and grab some files here. I'm just gonna go grab these files. I'm gonna put them in my folder. What did we call this extension? My company. I'm gonna put that in here. And we're going to add editor config comes in there automatically. That's nice. Add existing item. We want my README file. Do we want AppVer for this one? Yeah. Okay. So README, I'm not going to say it. The name of this is my company extension. Okay. And the this is the ID of it. The ID is right here. Use the CI build. We're going to, you're not going to be able to download the extension, so we're going to do it like this. I'm not going to have any description yet, coming soon. A collection of minor fixes we should come up with. Here's what it says, actually. That is the description of it right there, or the tagline, if you will. Okay. Now I have everything hooked up. I got my AppVer, which is my build server that I use personally for these extensions. And all I have to do is to move this to Git. So I'm going to go to Git up top here and say create Git repository. It's going to suggest my company. We're not going to make this private. And then we can just create and push. Oh, do you want to save it? Yes, save it. So now, let's see here. Where is my, here, let's just hit repositories. Is it up at my company?
Woohoo.
Awesome. And that means we and all the viewers can actually download a clean version of that and not use Yumi's
That's right.
messy
Hey,
one.
Isn't that
I'm
nice?
standing right here.
Oops.
Yeah. So,
But this is great.
Yeah. Do we have any questions out there?
No, I don't believe we do.
I
Okay.
think you're very thorough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what else can you use extensions for?
Let me just rename this to source. So I always do this, and I forgot to do it this time. I'd like my folder to be called source instead of the name. Visual Studio always does that, right? So I'm going to rename that. Now I can just open this again. And I want to push that out to, well, what you can do with what you can do is that you can basically do anything you want. Updated folder structure. There we go. I'm going to commit and push. So with extensions, you can do pretty much whatever it is that you want. There's no limitations. You're not running in a sandbox. You're running, all your C# is running, where you can interact with other processes. You can do connect to the internet and use web services or REST APIs or whatever it is that you want to do to achieve what you need.
Nice.
And so there's really no limits